One of my favorite uses for polka dot patterns is to make blue polka dots. I think that the blue dots look like bubbles, and so that's what I'm going to try to achieve today when I use 2 more of the stencils. So this one's called Duck Duck Dorothy. Pretty cute, right? And then the other stencil that I'm going to use is Delightful Dorothy. And so these are both from Elizabeth St. Hilaire's Dorothy Collection, which is her May stencil release that I got on Joggles. I'm going to start with a light ultramarine blue. This is a pretty opaque blue, and the way that you can tell that is that Golden puts a little bit of paint on top of some diagonal stripes, and you can tell the opacity of the paint by looking at how many or how much of the stripes you can see through that stripe of paint. And so this one's a pretty opaque one, and you can see that blotch on the press too. It'll also show pretty a lot of texture when you get, especially if you get too much down. It's just a really thick paint. And so then I added some iridescent pearl in with it to give me a little extra shimmer and to add some dimension. Off to the side to my left, you can see that I have a bunch of prints that I've already made. They are white and pearl backgrounds, so that anything that shows through the prints that I make will have a nice pearl shimmer to it. And so I've pulled my first print, and I can see that because that blue is so opaque and so juicy, I guess is the best way to describe that paint, I pick up some extra paint with my deli paper. And then there's a ton of paint left after I pick up the stencil. So I'll grab my Red Baron by Speedball and press down my paper into the gel plate. And that way I can pick up the rest of the paint. For some reason, it just didn't pick it all up because it's a little bit clumped together, but that's okay. I'm going to roll with it. And I know as I continue to layer these stencils together, I'll get a really cool layered look. And I would tell you that gel printing is not for the perfectionists out there. It is more, I would consider myself to be more of an abstract artist. And so I really like this because you get a unique look every time you make something new. So here we go. I'm just going to continue on with my layers and build up layer 1 with that lighter blue color. Now I'm ready to pick up another color to add dimension. So this is a cobalt blue, and you can see a little bit of the lines through that paint test stripe, but it is pretty opaque as well, just not quite as opaque as the lighter blue I used. And again, no project is complete without some iridescent pearl. I probably go through gallons of that. And it lightens up this blue quite a bit. Sometimes you notice that the iridescent pearl makes a big impact on the paint color, and this is one of those times where it really does lighten up that cobalt. And so that looks really neat, and I can tell that it's going to look excellent on top of my polka dots that I've already created. So I pick up my second stencil, which is the Duck Duck Dorothy. And I go ahead and grab one of the pages that I've already printed layers onto, and then I'll layer the two on top. So we have a light blue and a slightly darker blue. Not a major contrast, but there is some contrast. And so then in a different one, I'll pick up another layer on top of these dots. So I'm picking up the background on top of the dots. And that looks cool too. I can already see kind of a bubbly look coming up. So I'll continue to add layers, and then I am going to add a little bit darker blue too. So not just cobalt, but I'll play around with some other dark blues. In order to get more of the contrast that I'm looking for, I grab an even darker blue from Holbein, and I'll link to all of these paints in my product description. And so that darker blue, wow, that is a big difference. And that should add some needed contrast to the polka dots, because you don't want things to be all in the same color family, like a mid-range color, which was kind of what I was starting to get on these prints. You really can get some nice dimension when you add depth to your paintings, and you can do that by adding colors from all different types of ranges. So here we go. I'm going to add that darker blue on there. And I'll make sure I press it down and get some good coverage on the page, because it'll be really noticeable if I don't. And there you go. So that looks much better. You can tell there's just more depth to it because I've added a darker color. And now it's time to pick up the dark paint that's left behind underneath the stencil. But I decided not to. I decided that I wanted to let that dry a little bit. So I did. And then I took some pearl. And this is a very light coat of pearlescent that I'm putting on top of the dark first layer. This is going to look so cool. So this is one way that I love to clean my gel plate. I'll let whatever is left over from my stencils dry onto the plate. Then I'll take a thin layer of white or pearl and pick up what's left. And I love it. That is, I'm sure, my favorite print of the entire batch, because it just has such cool texture and almost kind of like a story to it. So I can tell there's still some left down on the plate. So I add some more of the pearl down. And again, this is just a very thin layer, but I can see there are more bubbles that need to come up off of that plate. So I'm going to go ahead and take a blank piece of paper. And that one I used before, that was a blank piece of mixed media paper. So is this. I just have them torn out of my pad off to the side. I used Canson, probably because it was on sale, but I like it too. And I'm pressing really hard and taking a peek at the corners to see, is it coming up? I sure hope so, because that will look amazing. And there you go. So I got the rest of the bubbles up with that last cleanup print. And I really like the way that looked. So that'll allow me to start fresh, but I'm not done with these stencils, I've decided. So I go back to some of my darker paints and roll those out onto my gel plate. And I'm going to continue building up my layers. Here's a quick look at all of the prints that I completed. I like them so much better now that I added the dark layer on top to give me additional contrast. And I will use these in backgrounds for greeting cards that typically have some sort of ocean theme. I have a ton of stamps with aquarium type animals, so sharks and jellyfish and all of that. So looking forward to turning these into greeting card backgrounds in the near future. And so I'll just start by cutting them down and turning them into rectangles and getting some of the edges off so that they'll be ready to go. I hope you enjoyed today, and please subscribe to my channel and check out my blog over at Apple+Made. Talk to you soon. Have a great day.